The lights were too bright for a street that was supposed to be real. Times Square was dressed up like a movie set. Big screens, big music. A crowd packed shoulder to shoulder, phones held high like they were praying to glass. A Vought banner hung across a stage as wide as a building. On that stage, smiles were weapons. Capes waved, hands pointed. A man with perfect hair and a perfect jaw floated just above the floor, like gravity was a rule for other people. Homelander looked down at the crowd and let them love him. Cameras moved in a perfect circle around him. Producers gave quiet hand signals. Every cheer hit the speakers a second time, louder than the real sound. Huey Campbell stood near the back, trying to look like he belonged. He had a Vought wristband and a fake smile. He hated both. Beside him, Annie January, Starlight, kept her face calm. Her eyes were scanning exits, security lines, the little details no one else noticed. A planned save was about to happen. Annie could feel it the same way you can feel a storm before it hits. A loud pop sounded above the stage. At first, it looked like a trick, like one of those Vought special effects meant to make Homelander look even more godlike. But then the air tore. Not exploded. Not cracked. Tore. A thin line opened in the sky, like someone sliced it with a sharp blade. The line widened into a rip. The bright screens reflected in it like a broken mirror. Wind rushed out, cold and wrong, and the crowd's cheering stopped in the same second. Huey's stomach dropped. People screamed. Security yelled into earpieces. Homelander's smile stayed up for the cameras, but his eyes narrowed. Something fell from the rip. A person. A man in black clothing, calm as if he had stepped off a bus. A long coat fluttered around him. A white blindfold covered his eyes. His hair was messy, like he didn't care. He dropped straight down toward the stage. Huey expected a hard landing. Instead, the man touched down like a feather. No bend of the knees, no stumble. Just down and done. He tilted his head slightly, listening, like the sound of this place was new, and he was judging it. Then he spoke, loud enough to carry over the panic. "Okay," he said, casual and clear. "Pop quiz." Huey blinked. "Pop? What?" The blindfolded man lifted one finger. "Question 1, he said. "Where am I?" A few people laughed, because people always laugh when they don't understand what else to do. Then the planned save happened anyway, because Vought could not stop its own machine. A huge metal support rig above the stage snapped loose. It wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to drop in a controlled way so Homelander could catch it. Instead, it swung wide, slammed into a lighting tower, and the whole thing started to collapse toward the front row. Real screams now, real fear. Annie's body moved before her brain finished the thought. She ran. Homelander moved too, fast enough to blur. But he hesitated for half a second, just long enough for Huey to see it. He looked at the cameras first, not the people. The blindfolded man stepped forward. He didn't run. He didn't leap. He just walked. The falling rig came down like a building. The crowd surged back. Someone tripped. Someone cried. And then the rig stopped. It halted in midair, inches above heads, like the world had hit a wall no one could see. The blindfolded man stood under it with one hand, raised lazily, like he was stopping an elevator door. Huey's mouth fell open. Annie froze. Her heart hammered. Homelander stopped too, hovering beside the blindfolded man now, his cape fluttering, his smile fixed back in place. "Wow," Homelander said into a nearby camera, voice smooth. "Looks like we have a new friend." The blindfolded man turned his head toward Homelander. Even with the blindfold, it felt like he was looking straight at him. "Question 2, the man said. "Are you always this loud?" Homelander's smile twitched. In the crowd, phones rose again. People smelled a moment. Not a rescue, a fight. Annie felt it in her bones. Homelander leaned closer, friendly for the lens, sharp for the man. "You just dropped into my city," Homelander whispered. "You don't get to talk to me like that." The blindfolded man's mouth curved into a grin. Then, "Talk softer," he whispered back. Homelander's eyes flared with anger for one blink. A thin red glow started behind his pupils. Huey grabbed Annie's arm without thinking. "Annie." The blindfolded man sighed like a teacher who had seen this exact problem 100 times. And then the air between them refused. Homelander's heat vision flashed out. It hit nothing. Or it hit something that could not be touched. The red beam stopped in front of the blindfolded man's face, hanging in the air like a line drawn on glass. Gasps rolled through the crowd. Homelander stopped, confused for the first time in public. The blindfolded man lifted his other hand and gently pushed the air to the side. The beam slid away like it had been brushed off a table. "Class," the man said, voice light. "We're learning boundaries today." Homelander's jaw tightened. Annie felt a cold fear. Not from the blindfolded man, from what Homelander would do because of him. The blindfolded man turned slightly, as if he had remembered the crowd again. He pointed up at the rip in the sky, which was slowly shrinking, like a wound trying to close. Then he said, quieter, almost to himself. "No curses, no familiar flow." He paused. "And yet," he added, "this place feels rotten." He faced the crowd, the phones, the cameras, the fake smiles. "One more question," he said. Everyone held their breath. "Who's in charge here?" The first thing Billy Butcher did was pause the video and replay it 3 times. He watched the metal rig stop. He watched Homelander's beam get stuck in the air like it had hit an invisible wall. He watched the blindfolded man smile like none of it mattered. Butcher sat in a dark room that smelled like old coffee and gun oil. A small TV glowed on a table. Huey stood behind him, hands shaking, while Mother's Milk leaned against a wall with his arms crossed. Frenchie was sitting on the floor, eyes wide like a kid who had just seen a magic trick. Kimiko perched on a chair, silent, her gaze sharp. "Tell me I'm not seeing that," Huey said. "You're seeing it," replied. His voice was low, "and I don't like it." Butcher's eyes stayed on the screen. "That ain't a normal soup." Huey swallowed. He stopped Homelander. Like it was nothing. Butcher finally looked away from the TV and stared at Huey like he was measuring him. "That's the point, sunshine." Annie's voice came through Huey's phone speaker. She was whispering, breath tight. "He didn't attack anyone. He saved people. He didn't even flinch." Butcher scoffed. "Yeah, give it time. Power always shows its teeth." Frenchie leaned forward, excited and nervous at the same time. "Butcher, if he can do that to Homelander." Kimiko made a small motion with her hands, like she was squeezing something invisible. Then she pointed at the screen and tilted her head, questioning. "Exactly," Butcher said. "We don't know what he is. We don't know what he wants. But we do know what Vought will do." MM's face was tight. "They'll try to own him." "And if they can't?" Butcher asked. Huey knew the answer. He hated that he knew it. "They'll try to kill him," Huey said. Butcher smiled like a wolf. Bingo. On the TV, Homelander's face was frozen in a frame where his eyes looked confused. That frame was already disappearing online. Vaught's people would scrub it. They'd replace it with a better angle, a better lie. But the truth had already happened. Somebody had walked into Homelander's world and made him look small, and that made the world more dangerous, not less. In Vought Tower, the air was clean and cold. The conference room was glass and metal and perfect. Screens covered one wall, playing the same clip from 10 angles. Security footage, phone footage, drone footage. All of it slowed down and studied frame by frame. A group of people sat around a long table. Some were Vought executives, some were consultants from the government. Everyone wore a serious face. Stan Edgar sat at the head like a king who did not need a crown. He watched the blindfolded man stop the metal rig. He watched Homelander's beam fail. He did not blink. "Name?" a woman from Homeland Security asked. "A man fell out of the sky," another executive said. "No ID, no record, no social, no implants, nothing in our system." A scientist cleared his throat. "Our scanners can't read his biology properly. It's like..." He hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't get him fired. "It's like there's a barrier around him. We get normal readings, then we don't, then we do again." Stan Edgar leaned back slightly. "So," he said calmly, "you are telling me the most heavily watched city in the world has acquired a new variable." The room went silent. A Vought PR lead spoke quickly. "We can spin this. New hero appears. We can offer him a contract. We can call him something." "Not yet," Edgar said. The PR lead stopped. Edgar's eyes stayed on the screen. "We do not name what we cannot control." A door opened. Homelander walked in like he owned the air. His smile was gone. He didn't sit. He paced behind the chairs, like a shark circling a cage. "You're wasting time," Homelander said. "I'll find him." Edgar looked at him without fear. "And then?" Homelander's mouth tightened. "And then I'll handle it." A scientist spoke carefully. "Sir, we don't know if you can." Homelander snapped his head toward him. The scientist shrank. Edgar raised one finger, not to threaten, but to calm. "We will proceed rationally," he said. "We will make contact." Homelander's eyes burned. "He embarrassed me." Edgar's voice stayed even. "You embarrassed yourself by reacting." Homelander's hands curled. For a second, it looked like he might break the entire room. Then he forced his face back into something like calm. "How do we find him?" Homelander asked. Edgar turned to another screen. "We already have," he said. A live feed showed the blindfolded man in a quiet hallway of a Vought-owned medical clinic. He was walking slowly, hands in his pockets, head turning as if he could hear the walls breathe. Security guards followed him from a distance, holding rifles like they meant something. The blindfolded man stopped. He turned his head toward a camera in the ceiling, and even through the feed, it felt like he was looking straight at Edgar. "Question 3, the blindfolded man said, cheerful. "Why are you all hiding?" Homelander's lips pulled back. "He's mocking us." Edgar's expression did not change. "No," Edgar said. "He's teaching." The blindfolded man let them escort him, not because they were strong, because he was curious. He walked through white halls and bright rooms. People in lab coats stared like they were watching a wild animal that had learned to smile. He stopped at a glass wall and watched nurses move behind it. A man with a clipboard approached, trying to sound friendly. "Hello, I'm Dr. Cardosa. We're here to help." The blindfolded man tilted his head. "Help me with what?" "With your situation," Cardosa said, sweating. "You've had an unusual event." "Sure," the man said easily. "I fell through a hole in the sky. That part is unusual." Cardosa swallowed. "We need to understand you. For public safety." The blindfolded man's smile softened. "Public safety, that's a nice phrase." He leaned a little closer. "Pop quiz for you. Do you say it because you mean it, or because you were told to say it?" Cardosa blinked, caught off guard. A security guard lifted his rifle slightly. "Don't mess around." The blindfolded man turned his face toward the guard. "Ah," he said. "A student who thinks yelling is a plan." The guard flushed. "I'm not..." The blindfolded man stepped forward. The guard tried to step back, but his boot stuck like the floor had turned thick. His eyes went wide. "What the..." The blindfolded man lifted a hand, and tapped the air in front of the rifle barrel. The barrel did not touch him. It stopped short, like it hit a wall. "Relax," the blindfolded man said. "If I wanted to hurt you, you would already be hurt." He stepped away, and the guard could move again. The guard's hands shook. Cardosa tried to regain control. "Sir, what is your name?" The blindfolded man paused like he was deciding if names mattered here. Then he said, "Gojo." A beat. "And my first name?" he added, as if he found the game funny. "Satoru." Cardosa nodded quickly. "Mr. Gojo, thank you." Gojo sighed. "Not Mr. Just Gojo is fine." Cardosa gestured to a chair and a table. "Please sit. We will ask some questions." Gojo sat like he was at a cafe, not in a facility full of armed guards. Cardosa clicked a recorder on. "Where are you from?" Gojo leaned back. "Not from here." Cardosa forced a laugh. "Yes, we gathered that." Gojo's smile returned. "I'm a teacher." Cardosa blinked. "A teacher?" "Yes," Gojo said simply. "I teach kids how to survive." Cardosa's eyes flicked to the guards, as if trying to decide if this was a lie. "Survive what?" Gojo's face turned serious for the first time. Not angry, not scared. Just honest. "Things people create," he said. "When they are afraid, when they hate, when they suffer." Cardosa frowned. "You mean criminals?" Gojo shook his head. "Worse than criminals. Curses." A guard snorted. "Curses aren't real." Gojo's head turned toward him. "In your world," he said quietly. "Maybe they weren't." The guard opened his mouth. Gojo's voice stayed calm. "But fear is real, isn't it? Anger is real. Lies are real. In my world, those things leave stains. Sometimes the stain becomes a monster." Cardosa stared. "You're saying?" "Fear makes monsters." Gojo nodded once. "Yes." In another room, behind glass, Stan Edgar watched the interview. He did not look impressed. He looked interested. In the corner of that room, a CIA woman, Mallory's people, watched with a hard jaw. "He's not a soup," she murmured. Edgar replied without looking away. "In this world, we call anything powerful a soup." The CIA woman's eyes narrowed. "He stopped Homelander's heat vision." Edgar's mouth barely moved. "Yes." "And you're calm." Edgar finally turned his gaze toward her. "Panic is for people without options." He nodded at the screen. "We have options. We have patience." The CIA woman frowned. "You can't buy him." Edgar's voice stayed smooth. "Perhaps not, but I can buy the world's opinion of him." Huey did not want to go back to Vought Tower, but Annie had asked him to come, and Huey had learned a long time ago that when Annie sounded like that, tight and urgent, something was about to go bad. He wore a hoodie and kept his head down as he slipped into the building with a delivery group. His heart was beating too fast. Annie met him in a maintenance hallway. Her eyes were sharp and tired. "He's here," she whispered. Huey swallowed. "The blindfold guy?" Annie nodded. "They're interviewing him, studying him, like he's a new product." Huey's stomach turned. "We have to get him out." And he grabbed Huey's wrist and pulled him along. "We have to see what he is first. He's not normal." "None of them are normal," Huey said. Annie stopped and looked at him hard. "Huey, when Homelander looked at him, I saw fear." Huey's throat went dry. "Homelander doesn't get scared." "He did," Annie said, "just for a second." They reached a door with a small window. Annie peeked in. Gojo sat at a table, relaxed, fingers tapping lightly like he was counting beats in music. Guards lined the walls. Cardosa spoke into a recorder. Huey looked through the window too. Gojo's blindfold was still on. His posture was loose, but the air around him felt heavy, even from here. Like the room itself was careful. Cardosa asked, "What are you capable of?" Gojo smiled. A lot. Cardosa tried to push. Are you a threat? Gojo's smile faded. Pop quiz, he said again. What makes someone a threat? Power or choices? Cardosa hesitated. Choices. Gojo nodded. Good answer. A guard spoke up, voice rough. If you're so strong, why didn't you kill Homelander? Huey froze. Annie's hand tightened. Gojo looked toward the guard. Because I don't kill people just to prove a point, he said. The guard scoffed. So you're a hero? Gojo paused. He leaned back. In my world, he said slowly, being a hero isn't a costume. It's a job you do even when no one claps. Annie's face softened for half a second. Then the door at the end of the hall opened. Billy Butcher stepped into the corridor like he owned it. Huey's eyes widened. Butcher, what are you doing here? Butcher didn't answer. He walked up to the window, looked through, and smiled. Bloody hell, Butcher muttered. That's him, all right. Annie's voice turned sharp. You can't be here. Butcher's grin stayed. Can't? Love, I've been doing can't my whole life. He leaned toward the glass like Gojo could hear him through it. All right then, Butcher whispered. Let's see what you really are. Inside the room, Gojo's head turned. He faced the door. He hadn't seen Butcher. The blindfold was on. The walls were thick, but he smiled anyway. Question 4, Gojo said, loud enough for the whole room. Who just walked in with murder on his breath? Butcher's grin faded. Huey felt his skin crawl. Because Gojo hadn't guessed. He had known. The next day, Vought set the stage again. Not on a street this time. On the news. A Vought anchor smiled into a camera and said the words like a prayer. A mysterious, new-powered individual appeared in New York yesterday. Vought is working closely with our heroes and our government partners to ensure public safety. Huey watched from the boys' hideout, feeling sick. On the screen, they showed the clip again, carefully edited. They cut out Homelander's confusion. They cut out the stuck beam. They cut out the blindfolded man's line about the world feeling rotten. They replaced it with a different angle, a better lie. shook his head. They're already owning the story. Frenchie leaned forward. But they cannot own him, no? Butcher lit a cigarette. That's why they'll try to break him. Kimiko tapped the table twice, then pointed at the screen. Her eyes were asking the same question as Huey's heart. What happens when someone finally refuses Vought? Annie's voice came through again, tense. She was inside Vought. She was risking everything. They're moving him, she whispered. Off-site. MM's face tightened. Where? Annie hesitated. I don't know, but they're planning something big. Butcher's eyes narrowed. Course they are. Huey leaned forward, desperate. What kind of big? Annie's whisper was tight. A crisis. A terror situation. They want him on camera. They want to test him. Butcher nodded like it confirmed every ugly thought he'd ever had. They want to see if he's a weapon they can aim. Stood up. Then we don't let them. Butcher blew smoke and smiled. We can't stop the whole bloody machine. Huey's hands clenched. We can try to save people. Butcher's eyes flicked to him. And if your blindfold teacher goes bad, sunshine? Huey didn't have an answer. But deep down, he knew one thing. Homelander had looked afraid. And people like Homelander didn't stay afraid. They got even. The crisis hit at noon. Penn Station was packed. Commuters, tourists, kids holding parents' hands, people buying snacks, people checking watches. Normal life. Then the alarm screamed. A loud blast shook the far end of the station. Dust rose. People yelled. Phones came out. A security guard shouted, "Get down!" As if that would stop anything. Annie pushed through the crowd, hood up, eyes sharp. Huey was behind her, trying not to panic. Mem followed with steady steps. Butcher hung back, watching angles, already looking for snipers, exits, traps. Frenchie murmured, "This is too clean." Kimiko's eyes scanned faces. She spotted fear. She spotted anger. She spotted something staged. On a balcony above, cameras were already positioned. Huey's stomach dropped when he saw that. "Vought," he whispered. A man in a black tactical suit appeared near the center of the station. He was shouting. He held something like a detonator. His face was half covered. His voice was too loud and too rehearsed. "I'm here to expose Vote!" he screamed. "They are!" A second explosion hit. People screamed and ran. A mother fell. A kid cried. Annie's hands glowed. She lifted them, trying to steady the crowd, trying to make space, trying to keep people from being crushed. Huey grabbed a fallen woman's arm and pulled her up. "Move! Please, move!" Butcher watched the terrorist and felt his jaw tighten. That guy wasn't here to expose anything. He was here to create footage. Then the air changed, like the station took a breath and held it. A figure walked into the open from the far hall. Black coat, white blindfold, hands in pockets. He looked like he was late for class again. People saw him and screamed, because in this world, someone calm in chaos was usually the most dangerous thing of all. Gojo stopped in the middle of the station and turned his head slowly, like he was listening to the whole building at once. He spoke, clear and light. "Pop quiz," he said. "Who here is actually trying to save people?" The terrorist swung toward him. "Back off, Gojo tilted his head. "You're not even good at lying," he said. The man shoved a button. A line of charges along a support beam flashed. The beam started to collapse toward a crowd trapped near an escalator. Annie's heart jumped. She ran. Huey's lungs burned. He ran too, even though he knew he couldn't do much. Gojo moved. He didn't sprint like a normal person. He simply appeared closer, fast enough that Huey blinked and lost track. Gojo lifted one hand. The collapsing beam stopped in midair, not wobbling, not barely held. Stopped. Clean, like it had hit a hard wall. People stared, frozen. Some cried. Some filmed. Some whispered, "Who is that?" Annie skidded to a stop and stared at the beam hanging over people's heads. Gojo glanced at her. "Good instincts," he said, like he was grading her. Annie's mouth opened. Then she snapped back into action. "Get everyone out!" she shouted. MM took over crowd control, voice booming. "Move! Calm down! This way!" Gojo looked back at the terrorist. "Okay," he said. "Your turn." The man pulled out a rifle and fired. The bullets hit the air and stopped. They hung there, inches from Gojo's coat, like metal bugs pinned in place. The shooter's eyes went wide. Gojo sighed. "That's not gonna work." He flicked his fingers. The bullets dropped to the floor with soft pings. Then Gojo lifted his hand, palm open, and the air in front of the shooter tugged hard. The shooter's body jerked forward like a giant invisible hand had grabbed his chest. He flew across the floor and slammed into a vending machine. Hard enough to dent metal, not hard enough to kill. Gojo kept his voice calm. "Sit," he said. The shooter slumped, groaning, unable to move right. Huey stared. He could have... He didn't, Annie whispered, watching Gojo's choices as much as his power. The station shook again. A third blast, bigger, went off near the tracks. People screamed. A wave of heat and dust rolled through, and then the ceiling lights dimmed, as if the building itself had started to fail. Annie's fear turned cold. This wasn't just about making Gojo look good. This was about forcing him into a corner. Gojo turned his head toward the tracks, listening. For the first time, his smile faded. He started walking toward the danger, still calm, but now focused like a blade. Butcher watched him and murmured, "Go on then. Show us." On the balcony above, a VOT camera zoomed in, and from the far end of the station, a shadow moved. A second threat. Not the fake shouting guy. This one was real. A soup, one of VOT's hidden problems, pushed through broken doors. His skin looked burned in patches. His eyes were wild. He was shaking, like he hadn't slept in days. Electricity crawled over his arms in angry lines. The air around him buzzed. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like someone VOT had used and then thrown away. He screamed, raw and real, and the lights blew out in a chain. People screamed again. Annie stepped between the soup and a group of civilians. "Hey," she shouted. "Look at me! Don't—" The soup's electricity surged. Annie braced. Then the surge stopped short. Not because Annie blocked it, because it hit that invisible wall. Gojo stood between them now, close, too close. The soup's hands crackled, shaking. "Get away," he screamed. "They're in my head." Gojo's voice softened. "You're scared," he said. The soup laughed, broken. "Scared? You don't know scared." Gojo nodded. "You're right. I don't know you're scared." He lifted a finger. "But I know this part." The soup's electricity spiked again. Gojo didn't flinch. "Breathe," Gojo said, like a teacher in a noisy classroom. "In, out." The soup's chest heaved. He tried. He failed. His power surged out like a tantrum. Gojo lifted his hand and pulled. Not a punch. Not a blast. A pull. The electricity bent away from the crowd, sucked into a tight spiral in the air, like it was being gathered into a ball. Annie's eyes widened. She could feel the heat and the pressure, but it never touched her. Gojo held the storm in one hand like it was a toy. Then he snapped his fingers. The stored energy shot upward into the ceiling, punched through concrete, in a clean hole, and exploded outside into the sky where no one stood. The station went silent for one stunned second. Even the soup stopped screaming. Huey felt his knees go weak. Muttered. "Jesus." Frenchie's eyes shone. "Magnifique." Butcher didn't smile. He watched like a man watching a new weapon get tested. The soup fell to his knees, sobbing, hands smoking. Gojo crouched in front of him. "You're not a monster," Gojo said, simple and firm. "You're a person who got used." The soup looked up, tears and rage mixed. "Who are you?" Gojo paused. Then, like he decided the class had earned it, he spoke clearly. "Gojo Satoru," he said. "I'm a teacher." The Supa stared like the words made no sense. Behind them, Annie felt something twist in her chest. A teacher. In this world? It sounded impossible. And that meant it might be exactly what they needed. Then a slow clap echoed from above. Everyone looked up. Homelander hovered near a broken skylight, cape floating, face calm in that fake way that meant danger was boiling underneath. He had arrived late on purpose so the cameras could catch him entering the scene. His eyes dropped to Gojo, then to the civilian staring at Gojo like he was a miracle, then back to Gojo. Homelander smiled. "Wow," he said, voice carrying through the station. "New guy's really trying to steal my job." Gojo stood up slowly. He brushed dust from his sleeve like he didn't care. He looked up at Homelander. He spoke lightly, like he was speaking to a student who interrupted class. "Pop quiz," Gojo said. "Do you always show up after the hard part?" A few civilians laughed by accident. Homelander's smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. He dropped lower, hovering just a few meters above the ground. "I don't know who you think you are," Homelander said, voice smooth for the cameras. "But you're in my country. My city." Gojo tilted his head. "Your city," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. Annie's stomach turned. She knew where this was going. Homelander's voice softened. "You embarrassed me yesterday." Gojo's smile faded just a little. "That's your feeling," he said. "Not my job." Homelander's eyes flared red. Heat vision snapped out. It hit the invisible wall again. It stopped inches from Gojo's face. Gojo didn't move. The beam shook slightly, like Homelander was pushing harder. Gojo raised one hand and tapped the air again. The beam bent away like a hose being redirected. The crowd gasped. Huey saw it, clear and ugly. Homelander wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to be seen winning. Homelander cut the beam off and smiled wider. "Cute trick," he said. Then he moved. Fast. He dropped like a missile toward Gojo's chest, fist ready to turn a man into paste. Annie shouted, "Huey, down!" Huey ducked, eyes wide. Homelander's fist hit. Nothing. Or it hit an invisible, unbreakable space. Homelander's knuckles stopped short, shaking in the air like they were pressing against a glass wall. For a second, Homelander hovered there, stunned. Gojo leaned in slightly, voice quiet. "You're used to people moving when you move," Gojo said. "That's why you're sloppy." Homelander snarled and threw a second punch, a third, a fourth. Each one stopped short. The sound wasn't a hit. It was the sound of a fist meeting refusal. Homelander backed up, eyes burning. He tried heat vision again, sweeping it wide like he would cut the station apart if he had to. Gojo lifted his hand. The beam slid away from people like a line being erased. Annie stared. Gojo wasn't blocking. He was deciding where danger was allowed to exist. Homelander's jaw clenched. He shot upward, then dove again, trying to change angles, trying to get behind, above, below. Gojo's body barely moved. He turned his head, tracked Homelander's path, and stepped once to the side. Homelander's dive passed him like a plane missing its runway. Gojo sighed. "Okay," he said. "My turn." He lifted his hand, and the air around Homelander tugged, hard. Homelander's body jerked mid-flight, pulled off line like a fish on a hook, his face twisted with shock. He slammed into a thick concrete pillar at the edge of the station. The pillar cracked. Dust exploded. Civilians screamed. Gojo's eyes narrowed under the blindfold. He lifted his other hand and pointed. The dust stopped spreading. It froze in the air for a breath, then fell straight down in a neat line, like someone had cut the mess into a clean shape. Gojo's voice stayed calm, but it carried weight now. "No collateral," he said. "This isn't a playground." Homelander pushed off the pillar, furious. He looked at the crowd watching, the cameras above, the phones below. He couldn't hit Gojo, and everyone could see it. Homelander's smile returned, forced and bright. "Ladies and gentlemen," Homelander boomed, turning to the cameras. "Looks like our new friend has some serious power. Vought will be working closely with him to keep you safe." Gojo tilted his head. "Working closely," he repeated, amused. Homelander leaned in just enough for only Gojo to hear. "You're going to smile for me," he hissed, "or I'll make you." Gojo's voice dropped, quiet and sharp. "No," he said, "you won't." Homelander's eyes widened for a flicker. He felt it. Not a punch, not pain, a fact. That this man wasn't afraid. Gojo lifted one finger, like he was about to teach a final lesson. "I could end this fight in a second," Gojo said, still quiet. "But there are kids here. There are normal people here. So you're going to do something new." Homelander swallowed a breath, angry and confused. Gojo finished, simple as a rule written on a board. "You're going to leave." Homelander stared, jaw tight. The crowd watched. The cameras waited. Homelander's pride screamed at him to attack again. But something else screamed louder. The part of him that knew he could not touch this man. Homelander forced a laugh. He raised his hands like this was all a friendly joke. "Sure," he said loud enough for everyone. "We'll talk later." He floated backward, slow, controlled, pretending it was his choice. Then he shot up through the broken skylight and disappeared into the gray daylight. The station stayed silent for 2 long seconds. Then people began to breathe again. Phones shook in hands. A little boy near a pillar whispered, "Mom, why didn't Homelander win?" His mother didn't know what to say. Annie looked at Gojo, heart pounding. Huey looked too. Butcher's eyes were locked on Gojo like he was staring at a door he'd wanted open for years. MM's face was tense, but there was something else there too. Hope. The dangerous kind. Gojo turned slightly, as if he could feel all of them looking. He spoke lightly again, like he was switching back into teacher mode. "Class dismissed," he said. Then, quieter, to himself, so close that only Annie, standing near enough, caught it. "This world makes fear on purpose," Gojo murmured. "That's new." Above, somewhere beyond the broken roof, cameras were already sending the footage to Vought, and in Vought Tower, Stan Edgar would be watching the same moment with calm eyes. Not thinking, how do we stop him? Thinking, how do we frame him? Because now the truth was out in public. There was someone in this world who could make Homelander leave, and that meant everyone would come for him. Not with fists, with plans, with lies, with leverage. Gojo stood in the wreckage of Penn Station, dust on his coat, and smiled slightly. "Pop quiz," he said under his breath, like he was asking the air itself. "What will you all try next?" By nightfall, the whole country had seen Penn Station in slow motion. They saw the lights flicker. They saw people run. They saw the unknown man in a blindfold stand, in the middle of it all, like he was made of calm. They saw Homelander dive, and then stop short like he had hit an invisible wall. Vought tried to bury that last part, but the internet didn't care what Vought wanted. Annie sat in a small Vought dressing room with a mirror surrounded by bulbs. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Clips, edits, memes. One showed Homelander's fist hanging in the air inches from the blindfolded man's face, with a caption that made Annie's stomach turn. "When you meet the real top dog." She heard boots outside, people rushing, people pretending they weren't panicking. The door opened. Ashley Barrett stepped in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her hair was perfect. Her hands were shaking anyway. "Annie," Ashley said, too cheerful. "We need you downstairs. We're doing a quick press reset." Annie didn't move. "A reset?" Ashley nodded fast. "We're calling him a visiting international hero. We'll say he's working with us. We'll say it's under control." "It's not under control," Annie said. Ashley's smile tightened. "That's not the point." Annie stood. "Where is he?" Ashley blinked. "Who?" "Don't do that," Annie said. "The guy you're trying to turn into a product." Ashley lowered her voice. "He's in medical. Not restrained. Not threatened. We're being respectful." Annie stared at her. "You're scared of him." Ashley's eyes flashed. Then she leaned in, voice sharp. "Yes, because he made Homelander look stupid. And if Homelander looks stupid, people die." That was the most honest thing Ashley had said in years. Annie walked past her. "Take me to him." They went down 3 hallways and through 2 secured doors. Annie expected a cell. Instead, she found a clean, bright clinic room with a window overlooking the city. A few guards stood by the wall with guns held like comfort blankets. A doctor sat at a table with a recorder, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. And in the middle of the room, the blindfolded man sat on the edge of an exam bed, feet swinging slightly like a kid waiting for class to start. He turned his head toward the door as Annie entered. "Ah," he said, "you're the honest one." Annie stopped. "You remember me?" He smiled. "You were trying to stop a stampede while everyone else was trying to get a good angle." Annie looked at the guards. "Can we have a minute?" One guard laughed. "No." The blindfolded man raised a hand lazily. "Pop quiz," he said, friendly. What happens if you take one step closer? The guard's laughter died in his throat. Annie didn't know what the man did. He didn't move, he didn't attack, but the air felt heavier, like the room had rules now. The guard swallowed and looked away. Ashley stepped in fast. "Fine, 1 minute." She motioned. The guards shifted back. The doctor nearly fell out of his chair with relief and hurried out too. Ashley lingered at the doorway, watching Annie like she was watching a bomb. Then she left and shut the door. Annie faced the blindfolded man. "My name is Annie." "I heard," he said, "but you also glow. That seems more important." Annie frowned. "What's your name?" He leaned back, hands behind him on the bed. "Gojo Satoru. I'm a teacher." That sounded insane in this building full of lies. Annie crossed her arms. "A teacher of what?" Gojo's smile softened. "Of problems people don't want to admit they created." Annie's throat tightened. "You said something about curses." "Yeah," Gojo said easily, like he was talking about weather. "In my world, people's fear and hate and pain build up. Sometimes it becomes something with teeth." Annie stared at him. "That's not how this world works." Gojo tilted his head. "Are you sure?" Annie hesitated. "Because in this world, fear and hate didn't become monsters. They became celebrities. They became contracts. They became Homelander." Gojo spoke again, lighter. "Pop quiz. What do you think happens when a world like this finally meets something it can't control?" Annie exhaled. "It tries to control it harder." Gojo smiled. "Correct." Annie stepped closer, voice low. "They're going to use you. If they can't, they'll destroy you." Gojo didn't flinch. "I've been used before." Annie's eyes narrowed. "By who?" Gojo's voice stayed calm, but something colder lived under it. "People who said they were protecting everyone. People who thought being in charge meant being right." Annie nodded once. She understood that kind of person very well. "You need to leave," she said. Gojo's mouth twitched. "And go where?" Annie's jaw tightened. "Anywhere else. This place is poison." Gojo swung his feet once, like he was thinking. "Poison is a good word," he said. "There's a lot of it in the air outside, too." Annie felt a chill. "What do you mean?" Gojo turned his head toward the window. "This city is loud," he said. "Not just the noise, the feeling. Everyone is scared. Everyone is angry. Everyone is pretending they're not." He paused. "And now they're scared of me," he added, almost curious. "That changes things." Annie swallowed. "You don't want to be here." Gojo's smile returned, bright and almost annoying. "Actually, I'm kind of curious." Annie stared. "Curious." Gojo nodded. "I want to see what kind of world makes a guy like that," he said. And Annie knew he meant Homelander, and calls him a hero. Before Annie could answer, the door opened. Stan Edgar walked in like the room belonged to him. He didn't bring guards. He didn't bring threats. He brought calm. "Annie," Edgar said politely, as if they were at a charity dinner. "Thank you." Annie stiffened. "Sir." Edgar looked at Gojo. "Mr. Gojo." Gojo's smile widened. "Not Mr., just Gojo." Edgar nodded once, accepting the correction without offense. "Gojo, then." He sat at the table like a man about to negotiate a merger, not a man sitting across from something the world didn't understand. "First," Edgar said, "I want to apologize for any discomfort." Gojo leaned forward slightly. "Pop quiz," he said. "Do you mean that?" Edgar didn't blink. "I mean that your arrival created a public incident, and public incidents cost money. I prefer stability." Gojo chuckled. "Oh, you're fun." Annie's stomach twisted. Edgar always sounded polite right before he did something cruel. Edgar folded his hands. "We'd like to offer you help, a place to stay, resources. We can give you structure. Gojo's smile faded a bit. Structure? Edgar nodded. You've introduced yourself as a teacher. Teachers need facilities, students, support. Annie's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Edgar didn't look at her. Creating an offer that makes sense. Gojo tilted his head. And what do you get? Edgar's mouth formed a small, almost approving line. Good question, he said. We get to make sure your presence doesn't destabilize the country. Gojo nodded slowly. So you want to put me in a box? Edgar's tone stayed even. A partnership. Gojo laughed once. That's a box with better paint. Edgar's eyes stayed steady. You embarrassed Homelander. Gojo shrugged. He embarrassed himself. Edgar nodded again. Regardless, the public saw something they weren't supposed to see. They saw a crack. Gojo leaned back. That sounds like your problem. It's everyone's problem, Edgar said. When people stop believing in their protectors, they look for new ones. Gojo's voice turned mild. Maybe they should. Annie felt heat rise in her chest. She wanted Gojo to say more. She wanted him to tear down the lies. But this was Vought. Words were dangerous here. Edgar's gaze sharpened slightly. If you want to help people, you need to understand how this world functions. Gojo's smile returned, smaller now. I understand enough. Edgar continued. We can help you return to where you came from. Annie's eyes flicked to Gojo. Gojo went still for half a breath. Then he spoke, quiet but clear. You don't know where I came from. Edgar nodded. Not yet. Gojo's smile vanished. And you still promise to send me back. Edgar's voice stayed calm. Promises are tools. Gojo looked at him for a long second. The room felt like it tightened around the words. Then Gojo smiled again. Soft, but not friendly. Pop quiz, he said. How many people have you ruined with that sentence? Edgar didn't answer. He didn't have to. Annie could see it in his eyes. The number was large. The number didn't bother him. Gojo slid off the bed and stood. I'm not signing anything, he said. I'm not joining your team, and I'm not becoming a brand. Edgar stood too, smooth. That is unfortunate. Gojo's tone stayed light. You'll live. Edgar looked to Annie. Annie, you may go. Annie didn't move. He should leave. Edgar's face stayed polite. He's not leaving. Not yet. Gojo turned his head toward the door. That's cute, he said. You think you can decide that? Edgar did not react. He simply walked out. And the guards outside the door breathed again, like they had been holding air in their lungs the whole time. Homelander watched the edited clip on a wall of screens. He watched it again. And again. In the Vought edit, the blindfolded man looked like a strange side character. A helper. Someone who had assisted Homelander, while the real hero handled the threat. Homelander's smile on the screen was bright. His smile in the room was gone. He stood alone in a private suite high above the city. The windows were thick. The furniture was expensive. Everything was designed to survive him. He crushed a glass in his hand anyway. The shards fell like ice. Blood ran down his palm. His body healed fast, but the moment of pain didn't help. It never helped. He heard a faint laugh in his mind. Not a real laugh. The crowd's laugh. The internet's laugh. He could feel it even without hearing it. He moved to the mirror and stared at his own eyes. They watched you stop, he whispered to himself. He remembered the moment his fist hit that invisible wall. He remembered the feeling of nothing. Not resistance. Refusal. His jaw tightened until his teeth hurt. A knock came at the door. Homelander didn't say, "Come in." The door opened anyway, because people were stupid. A handler stepped in, trembling. "Sir, Stan wants—" Homelander's eyes snapped to him. The handler stopped breathing. Homelander smiled suddenly. "Tell Stan I'm fine. The handler nodded too fast. Yes, sir. Homelander took one step closer. And tell him, Homelander added softly, that I'm going to fix this. The handler's eyes filled with tears. Yes, sir. When the handler left, Homelander stood still for a long time. He didn't plan like Edgar. He didn't build systems like Newman. But he understood one thing perfectly. If you couldn't beat someone, you didn't stop trying. You changed the fight. He turned back to the screens, and his smile slowly returned. Not for the cameras, for himself. I'm going to make you kneel, he whispered, not with fists. Butcher didn't bother asking permission. He never did. He got into the building with a stolen badge and a gun he didn't plan to use unless he had to. Huey hated that he was there. He hated that part of him felt relief. Butcher moved through Vought's lower levels like he had lived there his whole life. He knew where cameras were. He knew where blind spots were. He knew how to walk like he belonged. Huey followed, sweating. You're going to get us killed, Huey whispered. Butcher glanced back. That's the spirit. They reached a service corridor. Annie was waiting there, arms crossed, eyes furious. What the hell are you doing here? She hissed. Butcher shrugged. Making new friends. Annie stepped close, voice low and shaking. He's not your weapon. Butcher leaned in too. And Homelander is? Annie's jaw clenched. This isn't a joke. Butcher's smile faded. No, it's a chance. He nodded toward the far door. Is he in there? Annie hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Butcher walked to the door and knocked once. From inside, a cheerful voice called out, "Come in." Butcher opened the door. Gojo was standing by the window now, looking down at the city like he was reading it. The blindfold was still on. He didn't turn around. You've got a strong smell, Gojo said casually. Cigarettes and murder. Butcher's grin twitched. Right. So you can do magic, and you can do insults. Gojo turned. Pop quiz, he said. Which one do you think is my main skill? Huey swallowed hard. Annie stayed by the door, tense. Butcher walked in like he owned the place. Let's skip the jokes, he said. You can stop Homelander. I saw it. Gojo's smile softened. You saw me stop a punch. Butcher's voice sharpened. Don't play cute. You can end him. Gojo didn't deny it. He just asked, calm. And then what? Butcher stared. Then we're free. Gojo tilted his head. You think killing one monster makes a world clean? Butcher's eyes flashed. It's a start. Gojo walked closer. Not threatening. Just close enough that Huey felt the air change again, like rules were being written around them. Gojo spoke quietly. You're full of anger, he said. It's eating you. Butcher's jaw tightened. Spare me. Gojo shrugged. Okay. I'll be direct. I'm not killing someone because you hate him. Butcher laughed, harsh. So you're a hero. Gojo's smile turned thin. I'm a teacher. Butcher stepped forward. Then teach me, he growled. Teach me how to end him. Gojo looked at him for a long moment. Then he said something that hit harder than a punch. If you get what you want, Gojo said, you'll still be empty. Butcher's face went still. Huey felt his throat tighten. He had seen that emptiness in Butcher before. He hated that Gojo saw it too. Butcher's voice went low. You don't know me, Gojo nodded. True, but I know pain, and I know what people do with it. Annie stepped forward, voice tight. Butcher, stop. Butcher didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Gojo. You're saying you won't help? Gojo sighed. I'm saying I won't be your knife. Butcher's mouth curled. Fine. Then you'll be theirs. He nodded toward the Vought badge clipped to his own stolen jacket. Gojo glanced at the badge. I'm not theirs either. Butcher spread his hands. Then what are you? Gojo smiled again, bright and annoying like the sun. I'm the guy who stops kids from dying, he said. Huey swallowed. That sounds good. Butcher snapped his gaze to Huey. Shut it. Gojo's head turned toward Huey. Pop quiz, he said to Huey kindly. Why are you scared right now? Huey blinked. Because you're strong, and I don't know what you'll do. Gojo nodded. Good answer. Then Gojo looked back at Butcher. And here's yours, Gojo said. Why are you really scared? Butcher's face tightened. He didn't answer. Gojo's smile faded into something more serious. Because if I don't kill him, Gojo said, you won't know what to do with your life. Butcher's eyes went hard. For a second, Annie thought Butcher might actually shoot. Not because it would work, just because it would feel good to try. Then Butcher stepped back and laughed like he didn't care. Yeah, all right, he said. You're clever, he pointed at Gojo. But don't pretend you're clean. You're enjoying this. Gojo didn't deny that either. He just said, honest, I'm not used to a world this small. Butcher's grin returned, colder now. Careful, mate, this small world bites. He turned and walked out. Huey exhaled, shaking. Annie looked at Gojo, voice low. He's right about one thing, she said. This world bites. Gojo nodded slowly. I noticed. The next morning, Vogt held a press conference. They built a stage with flags and clean podiums. They filled seats with paid supporters. They placed cameras at angles that made everything look heroic. Annie stood behind the curtain, jaw clenched, listening. Homelander walked on stage first, smiling wide. The crowd cheered like they were trained. Then Stan Edgar stepped up, calm, and spoke into the microphone like he was reading a weather report. We experienced an unfortunate incident, Edgar said. But thanks to the swift action of our heroes, lives were saved. He gestured. And with us today, Edgar continued, is a man who appeared during the crisis. A man we believe shares our commitment to public safety. The curtain moved. Gojo walked out. Not in a cape, not in a suit. Still in black. Still in a blindfold. Hands in pockets. Like this was boring. The crowd's cheering stuttered. People didn't know if they should clap. Gojo stopped beside the podium and looked out at the room. The blindfold made everyone uncomfortable. It didn't look like a hero's mask. It looked like a warning. A reporter called out, Sir, are you a new soup? Gojo tilted his head. A what? Another reporter shouted. What's your power? Gojo smiled. Pop quiz, he said, and the room went quiet because it sounded childish and strange in a room full of adult lies. Gojo pointed toward the crowd. You, he said, and a reporter froze. What do you think my power is? The reporter swallowed. I don't know. Gojo nodded. Correct. You don't know. And yet, you're here to decide what I am. Edgar's eyes flicked to him, warning. Homelander's smile tightened. Annie's stomach clenched behind the curtain. Gojo continued, voice still light, but now sharper. Here's my power, he said. I can tell when someone is lying. The room went still. Edgar's face didn't change. Homelander's smile didn't move. Gojo pointed at the paid supporters in the front row. You're paid, he said, casual. A woman's face went pale. Gojo pointed at a man near the side. You're scared, he said. The man swallowed hard. Gojo pointed at a reporter. You're excited, he said, because you want this to be a story, not a problem. The reporter's mouth fell open. Then Gojo pointed at Homelander. The room felt like it stopped breathing. Gojo's smile softened. And you, he said, are angry. Homelander's eyes sharpened, but he kept smiling for the cameras. Gojo turned back to the crowd. People are in danger, he said. Not because of monsters, because of choices. Edgar stepped closer to the mic. Thank you, Gojo, he said smoothly, trying to end it. Gojo held up a finger. "Last question," he said. Edgar paused. Gojo's voice stayed calm. "When you say public safety," he asked, "who do you mean? The public or yourselves?" Silence. Then Edgar smiled politely and took the mic. "We appreciate Gojo's passion," Edgar said, "and we look forward to working together." Gojo stepped back, hands still in pockets, like he had said what he wanted to say. Behind the curtain, Annie's heart pounded, because Gojo had just done the one thing Vought hated most. He had made the room feel the truth for a second, and Vought would punish that. That night, Victoria Newman watched the clip alone in her office. She paused on the moment Gojo pointed at Homelander. She replayed it, not because she enjoyed it, because she measured threats the way other people measured weather. Her aide knocked and entered carefully. "Ma'am, Vought is requesting." Newman held up a hand, still watching. "He's not like them," Newman said. The aide hesitated. "Like soups?" Newman nodded. "Soups are products. Even when they act wild, they're still part of the machine." She tapped the screen lightly. "This one isn't." The aide swallowed. "What do we do?" Newman's eyes narrowed. "We do what we always do," she said. "We make a law." Gojo stood on a rooftop later, alone, listening to the city. He didn't hear voices like normal hearing. Not exactly. He felt the weight of feelings. Fear, anger, obsession, worship. They rolled through the streets like heat waves. In his world, that kind of weight gathered into shapes. Here, it had always been. Scattered. Blunted. Like the world didn't know how to turn it into curses. But now, he was here. Now the air knew him. A small ripple passed near a glowing billboard. Gojo turned his head. For a blink, he saw something like a smear of darkness clinging to the edge of the screen. It had no face yet. No body. Just a hungry idea. Gojo's smile faded. "So it's starting," he murmured. He thought of Penn Station, of the broken soup crying on the floor, of Annie stepping in front of civilians without thinking. He thought of Butcher's eyes. This world didn't have curses like his, but it had everything needed to make them. And now it had a reason. Gojo took a slow breath. Then he smiled again. Small but real. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's teach." A few days later, Gojo was already bored of Vought. They tried to keep him in clean rooms. They tried to talk at him with calm voices. They tried to move him like a piece, on a board. He let them try for a while just to learn the game. Then, one morning, he simply wasn't where they left him. He didn't smash a wall. He didn't threaten anyone. He just walked out, past guards who suddenly found their legs refusing to move, past doors that opened like they wanted to, and into the city. Annie found him on a quiet street near a public park, standing by a small playground. Kids were laughing. Parents were tired. A dog barked at a pigeon. Normal. Gojo watched it like it was rare. Annie approached carefully. "You're going to get hunted." Gojo tilted his head. "They already are." Annie stood beside him, keeping her hood up. "Why here?" Gojo's voice softened. "Because kids are still kids," he said, "even in a rotten world." Annie glanced at him. "You said you're a teacher. Are you looking for students?" Gojo smiled. "Pop quiz," he said. "What happens when power grows in a world with no guidance?" Annie swallowed. "It becomes Homelander." Gojo nodded. "Exactly." He turned his head toward Annie. "So yes," he said, "I'm looking for students." Annie stared. "In this world? That's insane." Gojo's smile was bright. "That's why it might work." Annie hesitated, then spoke quietly. "There's a place." Gojo tilted his head. "A school." Annie nodded. "A university. For young soups. Vought runs it. They train them. They market them." Gojo's smile faded. "So, a factory." Annie's jaw tightened. Yeah. Gojo's voice turned calm and firm. Take me there. Godolkin University looked like a dream from far away. Clean buildings, bright banners, students walking in groups like everything was normal. But up close, Gojo could feel the pressure under it. The smiles were practiced. The cameras were everywhere. The fear was under the pavement. Annie and Gojo walked through the main entrance like they belonged. Annie kept her face neutral. Gojo didn't bother. Students stared at him. Some whispered, "Is that the guy?" Some raised their phones. A few smiled wide like they were already imagining the follower count. A campus staff member in a Vault blazer rushed up, sweating. "Starlight! We weren't told you were visiting." Annie cut him off. "I'm here," she said, flat. "That's enough." The staff member's eyes flicked to Gojo's blindfold. "And is this a new brand deal?" Gojo's head turned. "A brand deal," he repeated, amused. The staff member laughed nervously. "You know, the blindfold. It's iconic. We could—" Gojo leaned in slightly. "Pop quiz," he said softly. "What happens if you touch my blindfold?" The staff member froze. Gojo smiled. "Don't." Annie almost smiled too, despite herself. They walked deeper into campus. Gojo listened. He felt the way students' emotions spiked and dropped like waves. He felt the way adults watched them like inventory. They reached a training hall. Inside, young supes were sparring. A boy with super strength punched a reinforced bag. A girl made sharp light shapes with her hands. Someone else created a small wave of fire and laughed when a coach praised them like they had scored a goal. Gojo watched, quiet. Annie whispered, "These are kids." Gojo nodded. "Yes." A coach approached, cocky. "You here to give a pep talk?" Gojo smiled. "No." The coach blinked. "Then what?" Gojo walked to the center of the room and clapped once. The sound was small, but everyone turned anyway. Gojo spoke clear and simple. "Pop quiz," he said. "Who here has ever saved a normal person when no one was watching?" Silence. A few students shifted. Gojo waited. He didn't shame them. He just waited like he expected better. One girl slowly raised her hand. Gojo pointed. "Good. What happened?" The girl swallowed. "My neighbor fell down the stairs. I carried her." Gojo nodded. "Good." He pointed to another student, a boy with a smug grin. "You." The boy frowned. "What?" Gojo's voice stayed calm. "When was the last time you helped someone you couldn't get credit for helping?" The boy scoffed. "That's not how it works." Gojo smiled, but it wasn't friendly now. That's exactly the problem. Annie watched the students' faces change. Some got defensive. Some got uncomfortable. Some looked curious. A teacher with a tablet whispered to another staff member, "This is not approved messaging." Gojo turned his head toward them without seeing them. "I can hear you," he said cheerfully. "And you're failing." The staff member stiffened. Annie leaned close. "You're making enemies." Gojo shrugged. "I'm used to it." He turned back to the students. "Look," he said simply, "power is not a personality, and it's not a job title. If you want to be heroes, act like it. If you want to be weapons, admit that too." A student raised a hand. "Who are you to tell us that?" Gojo smiled. "A teacher." The student frowned. "At what school?" Gojo paused. For a second, Annie thought he would dodge it. But Gojo's voice turned honest. "In my world," he said, "we fight things you can't see. And I teach kids not to die." The room went quiet. A few students laughed nervously. Others stared. Annie felt a strange ache, because these kids didn't know what real training looked like. They only knew cameras. Gojo looked around once, slow. Then he spoke, softer. "You deserve better than being owned." Annie saw the truth hit them like a wave, and she saw something else too. Across the room, mounted high in a corner, A screen played a VOT news segment on loop. Gojo's face was on that screen. Homelander's face was on that screen. The crowd chanting outside Penn Station was on that screen. Gojo felt it before he saw it. A smear of darkness clinging to the edge of the screen. It was thicker now. Hungry. Gojo's smile vanished. Annie noticed. "What is it?" Gojo didn't answer right away. He walked toward the screen. The staff tensed. A guard shifted his stance. Gojo lifted a hand. The air around the screen seemed to ripple, and the smear on the edge moved, like it was alive. A student gasped. "What the hell is that?" Gojo's voice turned quiet. "That," he said, "is the part of your world you've been feeding." The screen flickered. Then it burst into static. Not normal static. The static crawled outward like insects. Lights in the hall dimmed. A low hum filled the air, like the building was vibrating. Students looked around, suddenly scared. Annie's chest tightened. "Gojo!" Gojo turned his head toward her. "Get them out," he said calmly. Annie blinked. "What?" Gojo's voice stayed steady. "Evacuate. Now." Annie didn't argue. She shouted, loud, "Everyone out! Now!" Some students hesitated. Gojo clapped once again. The sound was small, but it cut through panic. "Move!" he said, simple as a command in class. They moved. As students rushed for exits, the static on the screen poured down like black liquid. It hit the floor and rose up into a shape. Not a person. Not an animal. Something made of glare and noise and hunger. Its body was tall and thin, like it was built out of broken camera angles. Where its face should be, there was a bright white oval, like a spotlight pointed straight at you. It turned toward the room, and people's fear spiked so hard that Annie felt dizzy. The thing didn't speak with a mouth. It spoke through screens. Every phone in the room lit up at once, even in pockets. Every device played the same sound. A cheering crowd, then a scream, then Homelander's voice, smooth and proud, then a laugh. The laughter was wrong. It wasn't funny. It was hungry. Students stumbled, clutching their heads. Some fell to their knees, eyes wide, as if the noise was inside their skull. Annie grabbed a student by the shoulders and dragged him toward the exit. "Keep moving!" Gojo stood between the creature and the crowd like he had done at Penn Station. The creature's spotlight face turned toward him. It leaned forward. The air in front of it bent, as if it was trying to grab Gojo with pure attention. Gojo didn't move. The pull hit his infinity and stopped. The creature's body shuddered like it didn't understand the word no. Gojo sighed. "You're new," he said quietly, "and you're loud." The creature's glare brightened. A shockwave of noise blasted outward. Windows cracked. Phones exploded into sparks. A few students screamed as their ears rang. Gojo lifted one hand, and the shockwave stopped at an invisible line, held in place like a wall had appeared in the air. Annie stared, half dragging kids, half watching. He wasn't just fighting. He was controlling the whole room. Gojo stepped forward. "This is what you are," he said, voice calm. "You're made of fear and worship. You're made of crowds." The creature twitched, and screens along the walls lit up with one image after another. Homelander, smiling. Homelander, angry. Homelander, adored. Then Gojo, clipped and edited, his words twisted into something threatening. The creature was showing Annie exactly what it fed on. Stories, lies, attention. Gojo's voice turned firm. "Not here," he said. He snapped his fingers. The air tugged hard. A deep pull formed in front of the creature, like the world had turned into a drain. Blue. The creature's body stretched toward it, dragged like smoke being sucked into a vacuum. It fought back, trying to anchor itself with screens and sound. The hallway lights burst. Alarms screamed. Gojo stayed calm, He lifted his other hand. Red. A clean blast hit the creature's center, not like a bomb, but like a firm shove that broke its balance. The creature warped, its spotlight face flickering. Gojo stepped closer, still careful, still not using anything that would harm the fleeing students. Annie felt the building shake again. "Gojo!" she shouted. Gojo's voice stayed steady. "I know," he said. He looked toward the exit. Only a few stragglers remained. "Good." Gojo turned back to the creature. "And now," he said softly, "we go somewhere safer." He raised both hands. Blue formed again, deeper and stronger, pulling the creature tight into a smaller space. Then red hit from the opposite side. The pressure built between them. For a split second, Annie felt the air go thin, like the world was holding its breath. Gojo's voice was calm. "Hollow." He stopped himself. He didn't finish the word. Annie saw the choice on his face, even under the blindfold. He could erase the thing. But not here. Not with this many people nearby. Not with a building full of kids. So he changed tactics. Gojo stepped forward and tapped the creature's chest, if you could call it that. "Listen," Gojo said, voice sharp. "I'm going to teach you a rule." He pressed his hand forward. The creature hit infinity from the inside and couldn't escape. Gojo used that moment like a trap. He turned his wrist slightly and pulled. The creature's whole form folded inward, compressed by forces it couldn't understand. Then Gojo moved fast, too fast for Annie to track. He guided the compressed mass of the creature out through a shattered wall and into open air over the campus courtyard. Students and staff poured out into the courtyard, coughing, crying, staring up. They saw it. A tall, screaming shape made of light and static, hovering above the campus like a nightmare. Phones lifted. Of course they did. The creature drank that attention like water. It grew larger. It grew sharper. Its spotlight face widened, and the noise of a cheering crowd rolled out over the courtyard. People froze. Some students began to smile without meaning to, like their brains were being pulled into worship. Annie felt her stomach twist. "It's making them." Gojo landed in the courtyard, calm, and looked up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's teaching them." He stepped forward and raised one hand. Infinity expanded outward like a clear dome. Annie felt it without seeing it. The pressure eased. The noise hit the invisible barrier and died. Students blinked, confused, waking from a trance. Gojo kept his voice calm but firm. "No one look at it," he said. "Stop filming. Look down." Some obeyed. Some didn't. A few students couldn't help themselves. They kept staring. The creature's spotlight face locked onto them and surged forward like it wanted to eat their attention. Gojo moved one step, and the creature slammed into infinity again, stopped inches from his face. Gojo sighed, still not listening. He clapped once. The sound snapped a few more students out of it. Then Gojo looked toward Annie. "Call your friends," he said. "The ones who actually move people." Annie's hands shook as she pulled her phone out. "Huey, MM, now, Godolkin. Something is happening." MM arrived first with a stolen van and a face like thunder. Huey jumped out beside him, eyes wide. Frenchie and Kimiko followed, scanning like predators. They all froze when they saw the thing in the sky. Huey whispered, "That's not a soup." Frenchie's voice was tight. "No, that is something else." Kimiko's eyes narrowed. She made a small gesture with her hands, like she was miming a screen turning on and off. MM nodded slowly. "It's tied to the cameras." Huey looked around and saw it too. Phones were up everywhere. Campus security was filming. Vought drones hovered at the edge of the courtyard like vultures. Of course they were here. MM barked, "Everyone put your phones down, now!" Some listened, because his voice sounded like a father who meant it. Others didn't. They kept filming because fear and attention were stronger than sense. Gojo stood under the creature like he was holding the sky up. He glanced at the boys as they arrived, his mouth curved. Attendance is improving. Huey swallowed. What is that thing? Gojo's voice stayed calm. A curse, he said. Frowned. A what? Gojo pointed up. A monster made from feelings, he said. Fear, worship, hate, lies. Huey's throat went dry. So, our world made that. Gojo nodded once. Yeah. Frenchie stared up, fascinated and horrified. And it grows when we watch. Gojo pointed at him. Gold star. Kimiko moved closer to Gojo and looked at his blindfold, then at the crowd, then back at him. Her eyes asked a question without words. Gojo answered her gently. I can't do my biggest move here, he said. Simple. Too many minds too close. Huey stared. Your biggest move? Gojo smiled faintly. It's a lot. The creature surged again, slamming into Gojo's infinity dome, sending ripples through the air like a stone hitting water. People screamed and stumbled back. Gojo stayed steady. But he wasn't everywhere. On the far side of the courtyard, a few students were still staring and filming. The creature's face snapped toward them, and a wave of noise rolled out, slipping around the dome's edge where the barrier didn't cover. A couple students clutched their heads and dropped. Annie ran toward them. Kimiko ran too, faster. Mem shouted at the crowd to keep moving away. Huey followed Annie, heart hammering. And then Butcher arrived. He walked into the courtyard like he was late to a party, coat open, eyes cold. He took one look at the curse in the sky and said, What the actual? His gaze snapped to Gojo. That you're doing, mate. Gojo didn't look offended. He just sounded tired. No. Butcher's jaw tightened. Then it's your fault anyway. Gojo's smile turned thin. Pop quiz, he said. Do you want to help, or do you want to complain? Butcher stared at him. Then, surprisingly, Butcher looked away and barked at the crowd. Phones down. Move, you idiots. People flinched and moved because Butcher sounded like violence. Gojo watched him for half a second, like he was filing that moment away. The curse screamed again, louder. The drones near the edge of the courtyard zoomed closer, filming like hungry insects. Gojo's head turned toward them. Ah, he said. There's the real problem. He lifted one hand. Blue tugged at the drones. Not gently. The drones jerked out of position and slammed into each other mid-air, crashing down in a metal pile far from the crowd. A Vought security team shouted and raised weapons. Gojo glanced at them. Don't, he said. Their bullets hit the air and stopped. Stared, stunned. Gojo didn't look at Keep moving, people, he said. I'll handle the loud thing. The curse surged downward, spotlight face expanding, trying to crush the dome with raw force and attention. Gojo exhaled. Then he did something that made Annie's breath catch. He stepped forward and lifted his hand toward the curse like he was touching a wild animal's forehead. Enough, he said. The curse slammed into infinity and stopped. Gojo didn't push it away. He pulled it close. Blue tightened around the curse, dragging its mass into a smaller shape, compressing it until it shrieked and flickered. Gojo's voice stayed calm. It's feeding on being seen, he said, mostly to himself. So we stop the eyes? He looked down at Huey and Break screens, Gojo said. Everywhere. Phones, billboards, cameras, anything broadcasting. Make it blind. Huey blinked. That's a lot of screens. Gojo smiled faintly. Welcome to your world. Didn't hesitate. He started shouting orders, grabbing a campus megaphone. Phones down! Break them if you have to. Get inside the buildings away from screens. Move! Frenchie pulled out tools and started ripping. Power cables from a screen kiosk. Sparks flew. Kimiko sprinted to a nearby billboard control box and tore it open like it was paper. Annie ran with her, blasting light into screens until they shattered. Butcher grumbled, then pulled out a gun and started shooting security cameras off walls. "I always wanted to do this," he muttered. Gojo held the curse in place, steady as a pillar, while the world around him turned chaotic. And still, the curse fought. It pushed images into people's minds even without screens. It whispered through memory, Homelander's smile, the crowd's cheer, the feeling of worship. Some students began to chant without meaning to. Their eyes glazed. The curse swelled again. Gojo's jaw tightened slightly. He could end it in one clean moment if he used his domain, but he could not risk frying dozens of innocent minds. So he chose the harder path. He looked at Annie. "Get everyone away from me," he said. "Now." Annie understood. She shouted, "Back! Everyone back!" herded people. Huey grabbed students by sleeves and pulled them away. Frenchie and Kimiko cleared space, but the curse lunged, trying to drag Gojo into a crowd. Gojo stepped back, guiding it, moving it like a dangerous animal on a leash, pulling it away from bodies and toward open sky. The curse screamed, and the sound made some people stumble and vomit. Gojo's voice stayed calm, but it sharpened. "Stop," he said again. He lifted both hands. Blue formed behind the curse. Red formed in front. The curse jerked as the forces pinned it in a narrow channel. Gojo took a slow breath. Then he spoke quietly, like a teacher saying a rule at the end of class. "You don't get to use people," he said. He snapped his fingers. Blue and red collided, not into a huge blast across the ground, but upward, focused into the open air above the campus. A bright shock of force hit the curse's core. The curse flickered. Its spotlight face cracked like a screen breaking. It screamed, not with sound now, but with a rush of feelings. Fear, hate, worship, all spilling out at once. Gojo's infinity held that spill back from the crowd like a dam. Then Gojo stepped forward and did something smaller, cleaner. He reached into the broken shape and grabbed the core, an ugly knot of attention and hunger, and crushed it between his hands like he was squeezing out a bad idea. The curse collapsed. Black static rained down like ash and faded before it hit the ground. Silence fell across the courtyard. People stood still, blinking like they had just woken from a dream. Phones lay broken on the ground. Billboards were dark. Smoke rose from fried circuits. Gojo lowered his hands and exhaled once. Annie's chest heaved. Her hands shook. Huey stared at the empty sky. We did that." Gojo glanced at him. "You did," he said. "I just held the problem still." Butcher stared at Gojo like he was seeing a new kind of nightmare. "That thing was made from us," he muttered. Gojo's voice was quiet. "Yeah." MM's face was tight. "Is it over?" Gojo paused. He turned his head slowly toward a dark screen lying face up on the ground. For a split second, Annie thought she saw something move inside it. A tiny ripple, a leftover smear. Gojo's expression didn't change, but his tone did. "It's not over," he said softly. "Not if this world stays like this." Annie swallowed. "Meaning what?" Gojo looked up at the buildings, the cameras, the Vought logos, the smiling posters that were now dark. "It means your world makes this kind of thing," Gojo said, over and over. He turned toward Annie and the boys. "And it means I can't just punch the problem," he added. "I have to teach people not to feed it." Butcher scoffed. "Good luck with that." Gojo's smile returned, small but stubborn. "Pop quiz," he said, looking straight at Butcher. Butcher's jaw tightened. "What?" Gojo's voice stayed calm. "Are you going to keep being part of the poison?" he asked. "Or are you going to do something useful?" Butcher stared back, breathing hard, then looked away like he hated the question because it mattered. In the distance, sirens grew louder. And somewhere far above, in a quiet high place with thick glass, Homelander watched a live feed cut out mid-chaos. He saw the curse collapse. He saw the crowd survive. He saw the blindfolded man stand calm in the center of it. And he didn't see a hero. He saw a threat to worship. Homelander's smile spread slowly. "Okay," he whispered. "Teacher." His eyes narrowed. "Let's see what happens when the lesson gets personal." 2 weeks after Penn Station, New York had a new habit. People looked up more. Not because they trusted the sky, because they didn't. Gojo Satoru moved through the city like a rumor that refused to die. Some days he was seen on a bridge, stopping a pileup before it happened. Some nights he showed up in a dark alley, and a mugger's knife would stop in the air like it had hit glass. Then he would be gone before anyone could ask a question. Vought tried to keep him on camera. Gojo made it a game to stay off it. He wasn't hiding out of fear. He was hiding out of disgust. He learned fast how this world worked. Here, power was not enough. Power had to be owned. It had to be named. It had to be sold with a slogan and a smile. Gojo didn't mind being strong. He minded being turned into a product. His new routine was simple. He listened. He walked. He looked for the smears that didn't belong. The little knots of fear and worship that stuck to billboards and phone screens. The leftovers from that first curse at Godolkin. The tiny seeds that could grow into something huge if people kept feeding them. He found 3 in the first week. He crushed them before they learned how to scream. He found 7 in the second week, and every time he felt one form, he felt the same truth, like a weight in his chest. This world wasn't just making monsters, it was doing it on purpose. Billy Butcher hated routines, but even he had to admit this one was useful. The boys' hideout was louder now, not with shouting, but with motion. People moving gear, phones broken on purpose, TVs covered with blankets, a cheap radio used instead because it didn't feed the screens. MM called it the stupidest safety plan he had ever lived through. Frenchie called it a cleanse. Huey called it terrifying, but kinda nice. And every time someone argued, Gojo treated it like a class lesson. He stood in the middle of their grimy living room with his hands in his pockets, like this was a normal job. "Pop quiz," he said, cheerful. Butcher groaned. "If you say pop quiz one more time, I'm gonna—" Gojo pointed at him. "You're gonna what?" Butcher's mouth opened, then shut. He couldn't answer without sounding stupid. Gojo smiled. "Correct. You don't know." MM rubbed his forehead. "What is the quiz?" Gojo lifted one finger. "If you want fewer curses, what do you stop feeding?" Huey raised his hand without thinking. Butcher stared. "Don't do that. Don't raise your bloody hand." Huey lowered it halfway. "Screens," he said anyway. "Attention. Panic." Gojo nodded. "Good." Frenchie leaned forward, eyes bright. "And lies," he added, "because lies make fear." Gojo pointed. "Also good." Kimiko tapped the table twice, and then made a circle with her fingers, like a camera lens, then snapped it shut. Gojo nodded at her too. "Perfect." Annie stood near the doorway, arms crossed. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been in a long time. "You're teaching us how to not make your monsters," she said. Gojo's smile softened. "I'm teaching you how to not make any monsters." Butcher scoffed. "You can't teach this world." Gojo turned his head toward Butcher. "Pop quiz," he said, voice still light. Butcher's jaw clenched. "What?" Gojo's tone stayed calm. "Do you want this world to change?" he asked. "Or do you just want permission to keep hating it?" Silence. Huey's stomach tightened. Even MM stopped moving for a second. Butcher stared at the floor like it was an enemy. Then he spat. "Get on with it!" Gojo shrugged like he didn't care, but Huey saw it. He cared. He just refused to beg for it. Gojo continued. Second quiz, he said. If Homelander can't touch me, what will he touch instead? Annie's face tightened. Huey felt cold creep up his back. People. Gojo nodded once. Exactly. Butcher's voice turned low. Then he'll come for you through her. His eyes flicked to Annie. Annie didn't flinch. He already wants me dead, she said. This doesn't change that. Gojo's smile was small. It changes the timing. Stepped forward. So what's the plan? Gojo's answer was simple. We don't let him pick the battlefield. Butcher barked a laugh. And how do we do that, mate? You gonna put him in detention? Gojo tilted his head. Maybe. Butcher rolled his eyes. Jesus. Gojo continued, like Butcher hadn't spoken. We keep people moving. We stop cameras. We don't chase revenge. We stop harm. Butcher's mouth curled. You're allergic to the fun part. Gojo turned toward him. Fun part? Butcher stepped closer, voice hard. End him. Gojo didn't back away. He didn't blink. No. Butcher's eyes flashed. Still? Gojo's voice stayed steady. Still. Butcher looked like he wanted to scream. Instead, he turned away and punched a wall lightly, because he knew a real punch would break his own hand. Huey watched them both and felt sick. Two men with impossible force in different ways, both refusing to move. Annie spoke quietly. Butcher. He's right. If we turn him into a killer, we lose him. Butcher snapped. We don't have him. Gojo smiled faintly. Correct. Butcher looked back. So why are you even here? Gojo's expression softened, just a little. Because kids were about to die at Penn Station, he said. Because those students were going to get eaten by something they didn't understand. Because your world is full of people who don't deserve what happens to them. He paused. And because I'm bored, he added honestly. Huey blinked. Bored? Gojo nodded. When you're the strongest, boredom is a problem. Butcher scoffed. Poor you. Gojo glanced at him. Yeah, he said, calm. Poor me. For some reason, that made Butcher go quiet. Because Gojo didn't say it like a complaint. He said it like a warning. Stan Edgar didn't watch the news anymore. He watched behavior. He watched polls. He watched clips. He watched how quickly people turned a new face into a religion. He watched Gojo versus Homelander edits get millions of views in hours. He watched merch sites sell fake blindfolds in 3 colors. He watched teenagers copy the phrase pop quiz without knowing what it meant. He watched the seed of a new story grow, and he decided it was time to cut it. Edgar sat in a quiet office across from Victoria Newman. No cameras, no smiles, just 2 people who understood how to shape a country. Newman held a folder and tapped it lightly. Registration, she said. Mandatory. Edgar nodded. Public safety. Newman's mouth twitched, almost amused. You taught them that phrase too well. Edgar's voice stayed flat. Do you want him controlled or not? Newman leaned back. Controlled is a fantasy, she said. But contained? Maybe. Edgar nodded. We'll give the public a villain, he said. Or a hero, depending on what we need. Newman's eyes sharpened. He's not playing along. Edgar's tone stayed calm. Then we make him. Newman tilted her head. How? Edgar didn't answer right away. He simply said, We don't attack his body. Newman paused. We attack his purpose. Edgar nodded once. Exactly. Newman stared at a page in the folder. There's a rally next week, she said. A unity event. Vought-sponsored, national broadcast. Edgar's gaze didn't move. Perfect. Newman lowered her voice. And Homelander? Edgar's eyes cooled. Homelander is a weather problem, he said. You don't reason with weather. You plan around it. Newman's lips pressed together. He wants blood. Edgar's voice stayed even. He wants worship, Newman looked at Edgar, eyes hard. And you? Edgar paused. Control, he said. On the day of the rally, Annie could feel it before she saw it. Vought had built a stage near the river, with flags and fireworks and smiling families placed in the front row, like decorations. Drones hovered above like insects. The crowd was huge, the screens were bigger, and the fear under it all was thick enough that Gojo could taste it. He stood on a rooftop 2 blocks away, coat fluttering slightly, blindfold still on. Annie stood beside him, hood up, face tight. Huey and MM were on the street below with Frenchie and Kimiko, moving through the crowd like they belonged there. Butcher wasn't visible. That usually meant trouble. Annie's voice was tense. They're doing this to bait you. Gojo nodded. Yes. Annie swallowed. Then don't go. Gojo tilted his head. Pop quiz, he said gently. If I don't go, what happens? Annie's throat tightened. They hurt someone. Gojo nodded again. Correct. Annie looked away, angry at the world for being so predictable. Gojo glanced toward the stage. And if I do go, he added, they still try. Annie's jaw clenched. So what's the plan? Gojo's smile was small. We make their plan expensive. They moved. Gojo didn't leap in like a superhero. He didn't pose. He didn't glow. He simply stepped off the rooftop and landed lightly on a lower building, then down again and again, moving fast but quiet. In the crowd, people started to notice. Phones rose. Gojo sighed. Infinity expanded in a thin layer around him, not as a dome, but as a rule. People couldn't get close enough to grab him. Cameras couldn't get close enough to frame him the way Vought wanted. He walked through the crowd toward the stage as if it was a hallway at school. On the stage, Homelander stood at the center, smiling wide. Beside him, Victoria Newman wore a clean suit and a clean face. Stan Edgar stood just behind them, hands folded, calm as always. A Vought host spoke into the mic. And now America, a very special guest. Gojo stepped into the open. The crowd's sound shifted. Not cheering, not screaming. A confused roar, like a stadium seeing a new player walk onto the field. Homelander's smile widened. There he is, Homelander said into the mic, voice sweet and loud. Our mystery man. Gojo looked up at the stage. Hello, he said, like he was greeting a class. Homelander chuckled. Come on up, buddy. Gojo didn't move. Homelander's eyes narrowed slightly. Then he spread his arms for the cameras. We're all friends here, he said. Right? Gojo tilted his head. Pop quiz, he said, voice carrying without a mic. The crowd quieted in a weird, nervous way. Gojo pointed at Homelander. Have you ever saved someone when no one was watching? A few people laughed, unsure. Homelander's smile stayed fixed. His eyes hardened. Newman leaned toward her mic. We're here for unity, she said smoothly. Not antagonism. Gojo's head turned toward her. Unity? He repeated, curious. Newman smiled. Yes, unity. Safety. Responsibility. Gojo nodded slowly. Those are nice words, he said. Edgar watched from behind them, face unreadable. Gojo's voice stayed calm. Who are they for? He asked. Newman's smile didn't move. For the public. Gojo pointed at the screens, the drones, the armed security. The way exits were subtly blocked. Then why does it feel like a cage? He asked. A ripple moved through the crowd. Annie felt it like electricity. Homelander stepped forward with a laugh. This guy, he said. Always joking. Gojo didn't smile back. I'm not joking. Homelander's voice turned warmer, like honey. All right, he said. Let's do it your way. Come on stage. Talk to America. Tell them who you are. Gojo paused. He could feel it now. A tension line running through the crowd. People placed too perfectly. Security too ready. Drones hovering too low. And something else. A faint smell of gun oil. Butcher. Gojo's mouth curved slightly. Of course. Gojo took one step forward, then stopped. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to a whisper under the river noise. Huey's voice crackled in his ear through a small earpiece Frenchie had forced on him. "Gojo, MM found something under the stage." MM came on, breathing hard. Explosives. A lot. Annie's stomach dropped. They're going to blow their own rally? MM's voice was grim. They'll blame him. Gojo exhaled once. On stage, Homelander leaned toward the mic. "What's wrong?" he asked, smiling. "Stage fright?" Gojo looked up. His voice was calm and clear. "Everyone back away from the stage," he said. The crowd hesitated. Newman smiled politely. "There's no danger," she said. Gojo's head tilted toward her. "That's a lie." Newman's eyes sharpened for half a second. Gojo didn't wait. He raised his hand. Blue tugged at the air under the stage like a giant invisible hook. The ground shuddered. A hidden panel tore free, and a cluster of metal cases slid out into the open, wired, packed, ugly. The crowd screamed. People surged back. Homelander's smile vanished for a blink, then returned even wider. "Whoa," he laughed into the mic. "Looks like our new guy found—" Gojo cut him off, voice flat. "You put bombs under a crowd." The words hit the air like a slap. Newman leaned into her mic fast. "We don't know what this is," she said. "This could be part of an attack." Gojo looked directly at her. "Stop," he said. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of stop that made adults freeze. The bombs started to beep faster. Huey's voice snapped in Gojo's ear. "There are multiple sets. Frenchie found more near the barricades." Frenchie came on, breathless and excited in the worst way. "They are everywhere, mon ami." Gojo's jaw tightened slightly. He couldn't be everywhere. Not at once. This was the corner they wanted. Homelander lifted his arms, playing to the chaos. "Everybody stay calm," he boomed. "Vought heroes have it under control." Then, smoothly, like a magician, he leaned down and grabbed a woman from the front row. A normal woman. A mother. Her face went white as paper. Homelander pulled her up onto the stage and held her close, arm around her shoulders like a friendly hug. To the cameras, it looked protective. To Gojo, it looked like a knife. Homelander smiled down at her. "It's okay," he whispered loud enough for the mic to catch. "You're safe with me." The woman trembled. Her eyes begged the crowd for help. Homelander looked up at Gojo. His voice stayed sweet. "Now," he said, "let's all listen to our guest, because he clearly knows what he's doing." Gojo's smile was gone. Annie's voice came sharp in Gojo's ear. "He's using her." Gojo's tone was quiet. "I know." Homelander leaned closer to his mic. "Gojo," he said, saying the name like he owned it now. "Come up here. Tell America you're with us." Gojo didn't move. Homelander's eyes flashed. He tightened his hold on the woman just enough to make her gasp. Gojo's voice stayed calm, but it turned colder. "Let her go," Homelander laughed. "Or what?" he asked softly. Gojo didn't answer with threats. He answered with action. He lifted one hand. Infinity expanded in a thin, fast wave, like a clear wall sliding forward through the crowd. People who were surging stopped, not slammed, but gently halted, like the air told them, "Not now." The woman on stage stopped trembling as something invisible wrapped around her like a shield. Homelander's grip didn't loosen, but his arm couldn't squeeze tighter. His eyes widened a fraction. Gojo's voice carried. "She's not part of your speech." Homelander's smile twitched. He leaned into the mic. "You see, America?" he said. "He's dangerous. He's controlling people." Gojo glanced at the crowd. "I'm protecting them," he said. Newman stepped forward. "Sir," she said smoothly, "you are interfering with an active security situation." Gojo turned his head toward her. "You made the situation," he replied. Newman's smile stayed, but her eyes cooled. "We have laws." Gojo's tone stayed calm. "Then follow them." Behind the stage, Huey and MM were moving fast, pulling wires, cutting timers, sweating through their shirts. Frenchie was cursing in 3 languages. Kimiko tore apart metal boxes with her bare hands and threw them into the river, where they couldn't hurt anyone. Annie slipped through backstage shadows, trying to get close without being seen. Butcher finally revealed himself, on a scaffolding line to the side, a rifle aimed not at Gojo, but at Homelander's head. Huey saw him and hissed, "Butcher, don't!" Butcher's voice came through, low, "Just in case." Gojo heard it anyway. He didn't look at Butcher. He kept his focus on the stage. Homelander's eyes flicked around, sensing something. He didn't see Butcher, but he felt the tension. He leaned down to the woman again, voice soft and cruel. "Do you want to live?" he whispered. The woman sobbed. Homelander looked up at Gojo. "Say you're with Vought," he said. "Smile. Make it simple." Gojo's voice was quiet. "No." Homelander's smile hardened. "Then people die." Gojo's tone stayed steady. "Not today." Homelander's eyes burned red. He didn't shoot heat vision at Gojo. He knew it wouldn't work. He shot it at the crowd. A wide sweep meant to cut fear into the air. Gojo's infinity flared outward like a clear shield. The beam stopped short, hovering above heads like a line drawn on glass. The crowd screamed anyway, because they saw it. They saw Homelander try to burn them. Phones shook. Vought cameras captured it. Edgar's eyes narrowed for the first time. Homelander realized what he had shown. He shut the beam off fast and laughed loud into the mic. "Just clearing debris," he said. But the crowd's sound had changed. It wasn't worship anymore. It was confusion. It was doubt. Homelander felt it like an itch under his skin. Gojo spoke, voice loud enough to cut through everything. "You just showed them your real face," he said. Homelander's smile cracked. He grabbed the woman and pushed her toward the edge of the stage, toward a drop. A simple move. A cruel move. Gojo moved without moving. Infinity caught her like a hand. She floated in place, shaken, safe. Annie ran and grabbed her, pulling her behind cover. Homelander stared, furious. Gojo took one slow step forward. His voice turned low, meant for Homelander alone. "You don't get to use people like props." Homelander's eyes widened, not with fear yet, but with rage. "Who do you think you are?" he hissed. Gojo's mouth curved into a small smile. "A teacher," he said. Then he did something Homelander didn't expect. He turned away from Homelander. He turned toward the crowd. Gojo raised his hand, not in a threat, but in a calm signal. "Everyone," he said clearly, "walk away from the stage. Don't run, just walk." His voice was simple, steady, like a parent talking a kid through a nightmare. And somehow, people listened. Not all of them, but enough. Because for the first time in a long time, someone powerful was telling them to leave, not to watch. Huey's voice crackled. "Timers are cut," Mem shouted. "Backline cleared." Frenchie yelled, "Last one, done." Kimiko gave a sharp nod from behind a barricade, eyes locked on Gojo. The immediate danger was gone. Now it was just pride. And Homelander's pride was the most dangerous thing in the city. Homelander stepped off the stage and floated down toward Gojo, smiling wide for the cameras. "Great teamwork," he said loudly. "Right, buddy?" Gojo didn't smile back. Homelander lowered his voice. "I'm going to take something from you," he whispered. "You won't even see it coming." Gojo's voice stayed calm. "Pop quiz," he whispered back. "Do you think you're the first person to say that to me?" Homelander's jaw clenched. He rushed forward, fast, trying to slam Gojo into the ground just to feel control again. His fist stopped short. Infinity. The same wall. The same refusal. Homelander's face twisted. Gojo leaned in slightly. "You're not used to rules," he said quietly. "So here's one." Gojo lifted his hand and pointed, past Homelander, toward the river, toward open sky, away from people. Homelander felt it, even if he didn't understand it. The air itself was shifting. Blue. A pull, deep and violent, grabbed Homelander's body and yanked him sideways, off the crowd line, like the world itself had hooked him. Homelander slammed into the side of a service building near the waterfront. Concrete cracked, metal bent. No one screamed because no one was close enough to be hurt. Gojo moved after him in a blink, not teleporting, just crossing the space so fast it felt unfair. Annie watched from behind cover, breath caught. Butcher watched through his scope, eyes narrowed. Edgar watched from the stage, face tight, because the cameras were still rolling. Gojo stood in front of Homelander's dented wall and spoke in a voice that didn't need volume. "This is what you wanted," Gojo said. "A private moment." Homelander pushed off the wall, cape fluttering, eyes burning. "I'm gonna rip that blindfold off and show the world you bleed," he growled. Gojo sighed. "You still don't get it." Homelander lunged again, faster, angrier, swinging like he could force reality to change. His fist stopped short again. Gojo lifted 2 fingers. "Class," he said softly. "We're going to do a short lesson." Homelander snarled. "Stop talking!" Gojo's tone stayed calm. "This will take 0.2 seconds, he said. Homelander's eyes widened. "What?" Gojo's hands came together. The air folded. For a fraction of a moment, the world around Homelander became a clean, sealed space. Not huge, not citywide, small, tight, controlled, and inside it, unlimited void. Homelander's body froze. His eyes went wide, not with heat, but with panic. His mind flooded with too much, too fast, like every sound, every light, every thought in the world had been shoved into his brain at once. It lasted only a blink. Gojo ended it almost immediately. 0.2 seconds. Just enough. Homelander dropped to one knee, breathing hard, trembling like he had finally met something that could touch him where muscles couldn't. Gojo stood over him, calm. He didn't gloat, he didn't punch. He spoke like a teacher speaking to the worst kid in class, the one everyone was afraid of. "That was mercy," Gojo said. Homelander looked up, eyes wild. What did you do to me?" Gojo's voice stayed quiet. "I showed you the gap between you and me," he said. "So you stopped pretending." Homelander's breath shook. Rage tried to climb back into his face, but fear was there now too, stubborn and ugly. Gojo leaned down slightly. "Here's the rule," he said. "You don't hurt civilians to get to me. You don't hurt her. You don't hurt kids. You don't start fires just to watch people scream." Homelander's lip curled. Or what? Gojo didn't raise his voice. He just said the truth. "Or I end it," Gojo replied. Homelander stared, shaking. He wanted to call the bluff, but that 0.2 seconds had taught him something he couldn't unlearn. That Gojo wasn't bluffing. Gojo straightened. "And one more thing," he added, still calm. "You can't win a story by forcing people to clap." Homelander's eyes narrowed. "They'll always clap for me." Gojo tilted his head. "Pop quiz," he said softly. "Did they clap today?" Homelander flinched, because deep down he knew they hadn't. Not like before. Gojo stepped back. "Go back to your stage," he said. "Smile for your cameras. Pretend you saved everyone." Homelander's fists clenched. He looked like he wanted to explode, but he didn't move. Gojo's voice stayed even. "Leave," he said. Homelander rose slowly, shaking off dust, Forcing his face into a smile again like putting on a mask, he flew back toward the stage. Gojo watched him go, expression unreadable under the blindfold. He could feel it in the air. The fear was still there. The lies were still there. But something had changed. A crack, a tiny one, but real. Back at the stage, Edgar took the microphone as if nothing had happened. A professional pause, a professional smile. "We are grateful," Edgar said smoothly, "that no lives were lost today." Newman stood beside him, nodding, eyes scanning for the best angle. Homelander floated down behind them, smiling wide again. His eyes didn't look wide. They looked empty and furious. Edgar continued, "And we are grateful that Gojo has agreed to cooperate with our safety initiative." Gojo stepped back into view from the crowd line. He didn't take the stage. He didn't smile. He simply spoke loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch it. "I didn't agree," Gojo said. A ripple went through the crowd. Edgar's smile didn't move. "Gojo," Gojo cut him off. "Calm." "Stop," he said. Edgar paused, not because he was afraid of the word, because he was measuring the cost of pushing. Gojo turned slightly toward the crowd. "You were almost used as props," he said, direct. "For a story." Newman leaned into her mic, voice smooth. "He's agitated," she said. "He's confused. Gojo turned toward her. "You're lying," he said again. Newman's smile tightened. Gojo continued, voice steady. "If you want safety," he said, "build it with truth, not bombs." Then he turned and walked away. No cape, no pose, just leaving. People watched him go in stunned silence. Some tried to follow. Infinity kept them back gently, like a teacher guiding a crowd down a hallway without letting it crush itself. Annie found him near a side street a few minutes later, breathless. Huey and MM followed. Frenchie and Kimiko trailed behind, tired but alive. Butcher appeared last, hands in his pockets, face hard. Annie looked at Gojo. "You could have destroyed him," she whispered. "You didn't." Gojo nodded. "Yes." Butcher's voice was rough. "You scared him." Gojo didn't deny it. "Yes." Butcher stepped closer. "So now we can end him," he said. "Now you can help." Gojo's head turned toward him. "No," he said simply. Butcher's face twisted. "Why?" Gojo's voice stayed calm. "Because if I kill him," he said, "you'll think killing is the only answer to every problem." Butcher snapped. "In this world, it is." Gojo tilted his head. "Pop quiz," he said, quiet and sharp. "Did bombs under a crowd make your world safer today?" Butcher stopped. His throat moved like he was swallowing something bitter. Huey stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. "He's right," Huey said. "If we become them, we lose." Butcher glared at him. Huey didn't look away. MM exhaled slowly. "We got people out," he said. That mattered. Butcher looked at MM too, and for a second his anger flickered into something else. Exhaustion. He muttered, "Fine." Then he pointed at Gojo. "But you're staying on our side." Gojo smiled faintly. "I'm not on anyone's side," he said. "I'm on the side of people who don't get a choice." Annie's chest tightened. "What are you going to do now?" Gojo looked up at the city skyline. His voice was quiet. "Teach," he said. Huey blinked. "Teach who?" Gojo's smile returned, small but stubborn. "Whoever shows up," he said. Then he added, almost like a joke, but not really. "And whoever tries to use people as props gets detention." Butcher groaned. "Oh, for—" Annie almost laughed. Almost. Because she knew. Homelander would not accept detention. He would accept only worship. And he would come back with something worse than fists. But for the first time, Annie also knew something else. He could be stopped. Not by another monster. By someone who refused to become one. Night came quietly over the city. Gojo stood on a rooftop again, hands in his pockets, coat moving in the wind. The city below was loud, but from up here it felt far away, like a problem on a board. Annie climbed up after him and stood a few steps away, giving him space the way you give space to a wild animal you don't want to scare off. They watched the city for a while without speaking. Gojo finally broke the silence. "This world is weird," he said simply. Annie snorted softly. "Yeah." Gojo tilted his head. "People worship monsters," he said, "and call it hope." Annie's jaw tightened. "That's what Vought sells." Gojo nodded. "And it works." Annie stared out at the lights. "Most people don't have a choice," she said. "They want to believe someone is watching over them." Gojo's voice softened. "In my world," he said, "people make curses because they feel helpless. They feel trapped." Annie glanced at him. "And here?" Gojo's mouth curved, but it wasn't happy. "Here, people make curses because they're trained to stare," he said. "To clap, to hate together, to panic together." Annie swallowed. "Is that why that thing showed up at Godolkin?" Gojo nodded once. "Yes," he said. "That was your world learning how to turn feeling into teeth." Annie's arms crossed tighter. "So it'll happen again?" Gojo didn't pretend. "Yes." Annie looked down at the street far below. A couple walked hand in hand. A bus rolled by. Someone laughed outside a corner store. Normal life, trying hard to exist. Annie spoke quietly. "Why stay then?" Gojo's head tilted slightly. "Pop quiz," he said, softer than usual. Annie's lips twitched. "Okay." Gojo's voice was calm. "What happens if no one teaches?" he asked, "and the strongest person in the room only knows how to hit?" Annie's throat tightened. "You get Homelander." Gojo nodded. "Exactly." Annie looked at him, eyes tired and sharp. "So you're going to teach this world?" Gojo's smile was small. "Someone has to try," he said. Annie breathed out a shaky laugh. "You're insane." Gojo shrugged. "Maybe." He looked out over the city again. For a moment, Annie saw something in him that wasn't cocky. Loneliness. Not the loneliness of being unloved. The loneliness of being too far above everyone else to feel normal. Annie asked quietly, "Does being the strongest ever feel heavy?" Gojo was silent for a few seconds. Then he answered honestly. "Yeah," he said. "It's heavy." Annie nodded like she understood more than she wanted to. Below, a billboard flickered back on. A Vought ad. A smiling Homelander. Face, perfect and bright. Gojo stared at it. Then he lifted 2 fingers and flicked the air. The billboard went dark again. Clean. Silent. Annie blinked. "You can just do that?" Gojo's smile returned, a little playful. "Detention," he said. Annie laughed once, despite herself. Then she sobered, watching the dark billboard. "People are going to tell stories about you," she said. Gojo's voice was quiet. "They already are." Annie hesitated. "What story do you want?" Gojo thought for a moment. Then he said, simple and clear, "I want a story where kids don't have to be afraid." Annie's eyes stung. Gojo turned slightly, as if he could feel the city's fear shifting. He could. It was still there. But now it had a new shape, too. Curiosity. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Gojo exhaled slowly. "This world makes monsters," he said, almost to himself. Annie watched him. Gojo's smile was small but steady. "So I'll make something else," he finished. The wind moved over the rooftop. The city kept living below. And somewhere in that living, the next problem was already forming. Gojo stood still, listening, ready to teach it a rule.